Talk to you soon.
Good morning, everyone.
We'll start the recording, and then I'll pass it over to Colleen to begin her presentation. Colleen, I'll just briefly introduce you to everyone here.
Thank you.
So Colleen Kennedy is the Director of Innovation and Engagement with the BC Patient Safety and Quality Council. Prior to joining the Council, she led improvement efforts across the continuum of care through her role as the Manager of Quality and Patient Safety for Interior Health West and Patient Experience for Interior Health in BC. Colleen holds a Master's of Information Studies and a Master's of Health Administration from the University of British Columbia. She has completed training in quality improvement and the collaborative Breakthrough Series through the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. Colleen also has her green and black in healthcare from the Canadian passionate advocate for lifelong learning and has taken many courses in design, on design thinking and innovation, most recently from IDEO University. She is thankful on a daily basis for getting to do the work she does. So welcome, Colleen.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, everyone, and spending some time on this session on design thinking. Specifically, we're going to explore sort of some tools that we can use in terms of design tools and methods that can help foster creativity and innovation in the work that you do. Now, this session, I should really warn you, is usually at least a 4-hour session, so we've really compressed it. So I took hundreds of slides and boiled them down to 30. So just think about it as being a little bit of a taster. Now, this is usually a session where we really roll up our sleeves. It's meant to be a very hands-on, interactive session. So I'm going to challenge you this morning at 9:30 in the morning in Saskatchewan. I'm going to need you to really pay close attention. Listening to some of the content I'm providing around one of our case studies we're going to explore. And we're going to try and apply some of these tools together and do a little bit of an experiment and see how that works to do a WebEx with this interactive piece. So I really appreciate your help doing that together today. So as we go through the materials, I really want to encourage you to consider, how could you use these tools? And where could you use these approaches and exercises in the work that you're doing today? And, how can you link to your broader goals and objectives around improvement? So as I mentioned, warning, I'm really going to need you to listen carefully. This is going to be super hands-on, so I'll be asking you questions. So right away, I'm going to start with asking a question. So how many of you would consider yourselves creative or innovative? And we're going to use the hand mark right now, so just use the hand button next to your name. If you think you're super creative or innovative, it just naturally is easy for you. I love this. We've got Jacqueline put up her hand here, Ronalda. We've got quite a few people putting up your hands.
There is.
Look at that. All right. So we see a lot of people putting up their hands, and we see some people not putting up their hands, and it's really interesting. One of the most common excuses we hear from folks who are reluctant to sort of embrace innovative thinking is that they say they're not creative or they're not right-brain thinkers. And it's interesting, we always want to sort of start the conversation about this, is that this quote I think is so strong. It comes from Clayton Christensen, and he's a sort of really famous world expert on innovation, and talks about business administration and talks about innovation and creativity. So when he talks about it, he says that innovation and creativity is actually a function of our behavior, and it's something that can be cultivated and developed over time. And I'm just going to get you to mute your lines if you haven't already done so, folks. That would be fantastic. So the interesting thing is that the old myth around left or right brain predominance is actually incorrect. You're not creative or you're not creative. That new technology has allowed researchers to really look at our brains and to kind of understand some of the processes that are involved in creativity. And while there's still many unknowns, it points to a combination of several cognitive factors. And that there's actually sort of brain hubs and networks that form when we're thinking creatively, and that they're tools that we can develop and cultivate in our own competency. So when we look at design thinking, it can help us think more laterally. It can help us be more creative and innovative. And so that's what we're going to touch on today. And I always like to start with this quote because it's just reminding us that it's actually about behavior. So design thinking is really an approach to innovation that matches human needs with available resources. The key foundation of design thinking, though, is it's founded in empathy. And it's about learning who you're working for, learning who you're designing for, and really keeping them front and center in everything that you do. So in doing so, design thinking really provides concrete tools to cultivate those behaviors that Clayton Christensen referred to that can help you be more creative and more innovative. So there are many different models around design thinking. All of them are very similar. For the purpose of today, we needed to narrow it down a bit, so obviously couldn't cover many different models around design thinking. This particular model is from the Stanford Design School. The one thing that's really common, though, is the names might be slightly different, but the process for design thinking, regardless of the model used, is very similar. It runs from empathy to testing, and sort of empathy always being that core foundational piece. But before we sort of dig a little bit deeper into some of the design thinking methods and the model, I wanted to stop and pause for a second around the importance of mindset. I know that many of you on the call today are involved in improvement work across the province, have that opportunity to really explore how we can make things better, and often mindset is fundamental in that work. It's also fundamental, we found, for innovation, is that you can put a group of people in a room with all the tools they need to be successful, to innovate, be creative, use design thinking. But without the correct mindset, it can really get in their way and hinder the ability to be successful. So, you know, when we think about the proper mindset, this is particularly true of innovative thinking. And part of this is a little around creative confidence, actually believing that you can come up with some better solutions. Founding everything you do on empathy. We'll dig a bit deeper into this today, but the importance of truly understanding who you're working and designing for. And probably one of the most important ones is deferring judgment. Often when we're doing work, we will judge our own ideas or others' ideas before they really get a chance to even gain momentum. And it's about really committing to deferring the judgment, going for quantity and not quality often with your idea generation, and then starting to filter through them. So as we kind of think about this and you think about applying this, it's about not being afraid to put big ideas out there, that failure is going to happen, and it's only through failure that we get to better solutions. And so you want to try and keep trying new ideas, new methods, and then building and growing and learning from there, much like we do with a PDSA cycle, a plan, do, study, act cycle, and improvement. With design thinking, we're always testing those changes. It's a different model for helping us to test those. So let's dig a bit deeper into the Stanford Design School design thinking model and touching on each step, right from empathy through to testing. So for today, we're going to be walking you through an example from Denmark for the sake of what we're working on. And so wanted to give you a bit of a background, and this is where I said you really want to pay attention. We're going to leverage this, and I'm going to need you to remember some of these little facts as we move through some of the exercises today. But a municipality in Denmark used design thinking to help improve their failing food delivery service for seniors. And if anyone hasn't heard about this, I really recommend checking it out. It's called The Good Kitchen. And what they found in Denmark is that there was more than 125,000 senior citizens who relied on sort of government-sponsored meal delivery. And 60% of these seniors were actually living in assisted living, were malnourished. 20% had poor nutrition, and 20% were actually malnourished. That seniors were simply, they weren't eating enough. The meal delivery service wasn't palatable. It came, people didn't like the food, the presentation wasn't great. So not only were seniors not eating, but there was a lot of waste in the system. And I know there's a lot of work happening in the province of Saskatchewan around lean, and certainly how can we avoid that waste in the system? And they really explored how they can add value to the seniors in their communities and do a better job. And so we're going to use this as we walk through some of these models today. So starting with empathy, the first step in the design process is to empathize with the person you're designing for. So when we talk about what empathy is, I mean, all of us sort of know that, you know, we've got one definition up here, the ability to be aware of, understand, sensitive to another person's feelings. At this stage in the design process, it's all about really getting into someone else's shoes, truly understanding someone else's experience as best as you can. So often when we go into problem solving, and I can think of many examples in my career where I've done exactly this, is you know, you jump right into solutions, right? You just kind of, that's what we do. Oh, here's what we could do. We jump right into solutions. And often we're simply too close to a problem to actually see the bigger picture or truly understand it. And I love this quote that when we're inside the bottle, we can't see the label. So, how can we look outside of the box? How can we look at the broader context that's happening? And that's why this empathy stage is so important. It's taking us from our own assumptions and really moving towards looking at a broader perspective and a broader understanding of what people need in the system that we're designing for. So there's, when we think about empathy, it's really important to consider, those who are involved in a process. In this case of Denmark, thinking about talking to the seniors who are receiving the meals, perhaps the families of the seniors receiving the meals, spending some time actually talking to the food service workers that prepare the meals, that deliver the meals, looking at who's affected, who are the experts. Maybe you would actually do quite a bit of research on who's doing this well in the system and to understand and learn from that. So the empathy stage is really important, and I think if you were going to take one thing away from today, it would be to really remember this stage in design thinking. Because what it does is it allows us to truly understand another's perspective. And through empathy, we're really able to put ourselves in other people's shoes and understand their context. And so it's about trying to understand what the person might be feeling, trying to identify those feelings through words, and using that to really focus what you're doing to always keep your solution completely focused on the person who will be leveraging or using what you're developing. So this next bit is in terms of some of the methods for helping to empathize. Some of them are really interesting to think about how people have done this in the past. So to develop empathy, it can often be really useful to just change your perspective. So there were some designers doing some work for a bunch of children it's actually a children's clothing store. And what they did is they measured the average height with a ruler of the children that they were going to be serving in the store. And then they actually walked around on their knees in that case to get a sense of what it was like to be in a store and shopping for things at that perspective. So, what is it like when you're a child in a pediatric unit? What is that perspective like? Or if you're a child coming into the public health clinic to get your immunizations, what is that perspective like? The other thing that's been done is limiting yourself. So people were doing some work designing for some individuals who were visually impaired. And so to better understand what it would be like to function with limited vision, they put Vaseline on their glasses and tried to complete daily tasks with that scenario. So they really immersed themselves in the situation. Some people might do it yourself. So there was an example where somebody went into an emergency department, had permission from a patient as well as the providers that day to video the entire process, to truly spend some time looking at the perspective and critically evaluating it. People can engage in analogous experiences, so really seeing, well, if you can't kind of experience something, how can we simulate something similar? So folks were looking at wound care, and so a group of, this was male designers, actually waxed the chest hair off their chest to get the experience of what it would be like to have, sort of raw skin and how that would be managed. One of the more powerful things is looking at extremes. So looking at extreme examples. So if we look at our example in Denmark, who are people who are eating all of their food, and who are people who are eating none of it? What is going, and digging deeper into those stories and understanding. And of course, the use of observation and interviews are critically important. So if we go back to our good kitchen model and our good kitchen example, one thing they did is they really went back and they wanted to understand the user's needs. And so they did that by looking at interviews, spending time talking to both the food service workers as well as the seniors in the system, and trying to understand, what was going on there, understand what were the barriers to them eating their food, what was the barriers to the good nutrition, why was there so much malnutrition in a system where the food was being provided. A lot of this came to a loss of control over food choices. Also, a lot of seniors expressed how they missed that the food was seasonal. They had grown up where they would cook based on what was available in their communities, and they missed that food. Many folks had also stigma issues. They were embarrassed to accept government assistance. They didn't like eating alone. And so it reminded them of the time when their family, a large family, would be sitting around the dinner table, and that was no longer the case, and how lonely that could be. So, in terms of artifacts are often the things people see. So what are they seeing? What are they witnessing when they observe people in their environment? And they saw that most of the seniors are really responsible in their kitchen, and they really had this keen sense of the seasonal food, that they really had been used to, cooking with with plums when they were in season, or cooking with carrots when they were in season. And many times the seniors in their own homes were actually trying to customize the meals by adding spices or ingredients to make it more palatable to them. They also looked at, sort of people in the system. They looked at the providers, and they were really frustrated, some of the providers. When they were cooking, they felt like the meals looked sloppy. They didn't feel empowered to really cook the way they loved, and they weren't all that motivated in their work. So these are some really important points I'd like you to just take note of, because we're going to need to leverage these in one of the activities we do shortly. So often what we do is we'll create an empathy map, which sort of helps us gather a bit of a snapshot of who the person is that we're developing for. So what's important to them? Why do they want a new system? What is it that's going to really satisfy their needs? So in the case of providers, of people who are actually working in the system, they found that they felt undervalued or demoralized. They might have been deflated. They didn't feel like their job had very high status, even though they were often, many of them, trained chefs and cooks. They were often disgruntled staff with poor working conditions. There was a real focus on economy and having good kitchen skills in terms of how they worked, but they really had a desire to make things better and do things different, and they didn't always have the opportunity. They weren't always asked for how it could be better. So often these empathy maps, the reason I gave you an example of this is they can really help you write down and capture in a succinct way, who it is you're designing for and what is important to them. So for the sake of today's session, this is a little bit artificial. Normally you would have time to actually interview, dig deeper, look at surveys, evaluations, etc. But just to humor me, I thought what we could do is spend a bit of time actually creating an empathy map for our seniors in Denmark. So I'm going to ask you to write right on the slide here. And so if you haven't done this before, on the top left-hand side of the screen, just below the quick start, you can click on the little pencil, and it allows you to actually draw on the slide. So what you can do is pick the pencil and pick a color if you want to pick your favorite color to draw with. If you go down third from the bottom, there's a choice for a color. We're going to get you to write right on the screen some of the things you're thinking, some of the things you're seeing with these seniors. So to make it easier for you, let's just look at some examples. I'll throw one on there. So when we think about thinking and feeling, what we found is that some people were actually embarrassed. I'm actually not able to write on the screen for some reason, so I'm so sorry, everyone. But I'm going to get you all to start writing on the screen right now. So thinking about what are the seniors thinking and feeling. So some of them may feel embarrassed to affect government assistance. Oh, great, we got a line coming. It's about to start. There we go. Oh, you guys get a prize for interacting. Thank you. So they're thinking and feeling embarrassed, devalued, helpless. Okay, seriously, you get a big prize for being so engaged in this and already writing on the screen. Thank you. Loss of control, lonely, absolutely. This is great. They may have shame, helpless, embarrassed. This is very good, you guys. Thank you. So what else might you see? Like, what are you seeing about these seniors in their kitchen? So what are some of the things we also heard about the seniors? So going to the right-hand side, and can't see or help make food, fair enough. So there were some real challenges. They may have challenges doing those things. What are the other things you might have seen? When we think about the artifact one, and I know this isn't very fair to you because you didn't get a lot of information to start filling this out, but one thing we saw is that often the seniors would add some of their own food. They really wanted to do that. Oh, you guys are still on the first one, thanks and feeling. This is amazing. You're really capturing some really important points here. You're seeing that they're avoiding eating. Yeah, go for it. Just write any of the things you heard in any of the categories that you think they feel. Great. So they can't see or help making food. There's poor mobility. They can't smell the cooking. No interaction with others during meals. There's unappealing meals, a small apartment. Might be poor presentation of food. They may not have much room to live. Tasteless food. Stay and do. They might avoid eating. They're missing family. They're throwing away food. It's wasted. They're maybe not feeling heard. Socializing with peers. Hearing impairment might make it difficult, too loud, or don't understand conversations. This is amazing. Okay, seriously, you guys get a prize because there's not that many people on the line today, and you've been so engaged in this. So this is exactly it. So we're going to wrap this up now, but you've all captured some really important points, and thank you so much for jumping into this. we really know that these empathy maps can really serve as an important tool. So if we found everything we're doing and the people we're designing for, and the people in the system that we're working with, how powerful that is. We're actually keeping them at the front and center in everything. And when we talk about patient or person-centered care, this is like person and patient-centered design, and so how important that is in the work we do. So thank you very much for being so interactive there. I really appreciate it, you all. All right, so what would we do next? So after we've gone through the empathy stage, you actually want to take that and make sense of it. Taking things like what you've done in your empathy map, taking things from your interviews, from your extreme experiences that you've encountered, and it's really to highlight sort of the key insights about your subject. And this is the define stage. This is where you develop a deep understanding of the person and user and make sense of the information gathered. And so it's really about trying to define this into a sense of who the person is. So it's really understanding the challenge, searching for meaning and what's going to make a difference, helping to shape a point of view and frame the opportunities in the system. So based on all the information you're gathering, and we think back to the good kitchen, where are the opportunities? What could we do differently? And so one thing that can be used here is something called a persona. So what it does, because we can't possibly outline every single senior in the system in Denmark for the project that was being done for the Good Kitchen, what they did is they created a persona, so synthesis of different kinds of seniors. There might have been a senior who was very physically active or perhaps visually and hearing impaired, or there might have been a cluster of seniors who were perhaps bedridden or homebound. And so starting to get a sense of a synthesis of the kind of people that you're going to be designing for. And that, in this case, that one persona would represent many different people. So what you're trying to do is sort of aggregate the different kinds of people in the system, and not saying that it's a simple process. Some people love this process, some people it's very difficult, but it's sort of taking it and getting a sense of who is in the system and getting clusters or theming of the kinds of people. So personas are really interesting because they really do provide an opportunity to really ensure that you don't have self-referential thinking. And when I refer to that, what I mean is, you know, I talked at the very beginning how we often design solutions based on our own experiences. We often go right to solutions without fully understanding the problem or the context. What personas do is they give us a reference point, something to go back to all the time to learn and describe who the person is that we're working with, who the person is we're designing for. And so what they do is they provide a summary. And here's an example of how you might take some of that information from our empathy map that we just created and start to describe things. So, you know, a cluster of patients in the system, or a cluster of seniors who are living in their homes, you know, what are their desires? You know, what is it they want to do? You know, one thing we hear is that if they can, they'd like to be engaged in the meal prep. They were making it their own. They were adding spices. We also heard that they wanted to be able to explore the use of seasonal foods in their meals, and they wanted choice in how they were working. So those might be some of the goals that you would fill into a persona like this. The other thing you could look at is their attitudes. So what is the perception of the problem or their expectation around the solution? You know, so some of the attitudes might have been, you know, the shame that people were experiencing, some of the challenges they had, some of the loneliness they felt in terms of working alone. And so some of the behaviors is really looking at what is working. So they do like adding their own food. They do like seasonal food. They do miss kind of the social experience of eating. And so when they were looking at the solution, they actually explored exactly that. How can they really build a persona, or several personas in this case, to understand who the seniors were in their community? So in doing all this, sort of the next stage in the process is to take that information you've gathered in the empathy and design stage and really start ideating. Ideation is part of the design process in which you really try to generate a bunch of ideas. And remember I talked about at the very beginning about the mindset for innovation? This is the point where deferring judgment is critical, actually taking the time to just park your judgment and throw as many ideas out there. So at this stage, it's mentally really about going really wide and really broad in your ideas and throwing as many things out there as possible and then starting to narrow it down from there. So when we think about ideation, you really are going for quantity and not quality at this stage. And the deferring judgment is so important. So we're going to ask you to do that too, because we're going to try this in a minute. So when we're ideating, we're aiming for that quantity to reach quality. So we know that if you can generate as many ideas as possible, what happens is we can build on those ideas. I'm going to get you to use your hands again, but how many times have you been in a meeting where you've had this really great idea and you haven't said anything? Because you thought, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to throw that out there. So I'm going to get you to stick up your hands if you've ever had that experience. You had this really great idea, but you haven't wanted to. So you got a few people who've experienced this. Yeah. So often what happens we find in ideation is that we really want to throw those ideas out there as crazy as possible. Often we're guilty as much as anyone else of deferring judgment or judging for our own ideas. And so at this stage it's about throwing ideas out there, and this isn't just brainstorming. Well, brainstorming is really useful, and there's some really structured tools we can use to help with brainstorming. There's real structured methods that can help you do this successfully. But what we know is that if we can defer judgment, if we can throw ridiculous ideas out there and encourage others to throw ridiculous ideas out there, that we can often build on those ridiculous ideas and come up with something very tangible and useful. That often constraints can serve as a really helpful way to do this. There was a challenge in sort of transporting fluids that needed to be refrigerated in an area of Africa, and they explored a way that all the Coke was transported through the system. They developed these packets that would sit on top of the Coke bottles and stay cool in the coolers during transport. It was an ingenious solution. It was a constraint. Something wasn't available in the system, so they designed by what was in the system. So often looking at what gets in your way of doing something can be one of your most powerful tools when trying to ideate. The other thing, we talk about diverging a bit longer. What this means is that in design thinking, you're often going really broad. So when you're at the empathy stage, you're gathering as much information as you possibly can. And then you're narrowing again by the defining stage. That's when you're doing the work around developing your personas. At your ideation stage, you're diverging again. You're trying to throw as many ideas out there as possible and really taking the time to linger here. Just when you think you're done, keep pushing yourself for more ideas and more solutions. So how do we ideate? And this is challenging. I'm going to actually send some worksheets to Chelsea after we're done, which provides a lot more detail on the different kinds of tools and methods you can do for ideation. I'm also going to share a resource that we're developing at the Council that you're welcome to use. It's freely downloadable online that can help you do this. Some of the things we can do is insight. So you can often use and leverage your insights from what you've learned so far about the challenge to help you ideate. So, I mean, even if we're thinking about our seniors right now, how could we do things like just leverage the use of seasonal foods? How could we engage them in the cooking process? How could we make it more social? These are things we've heard from them, and there might be opportunities around that. You can also look at adjacent items. So exploring similar but different approaches to the challenge at hand. When we think about it, how many similarities are there between this food service and what happens in a restaurant? Seniors have said they want choice. Could we leverage some of the things we know about restaurants in the meal delivery service for seniors in their homes? Is a similar challenge that people go to restaurants. How do they design and develop those and make them a positive experience for people? And perhaps there's something we can do that. And lastly, you can be disruptive, which is taking an idea and completely turning it on its head. Maybe reframing the way you're thinking about a challenge. So how can you think, maybe we're not coming to the seniors. Maybe the seniors are going somewhere in a central location, those who are able-bodied enough, so they have a social experience for these meals. So obviously we don't have the time for today's session to dig really deeply into these. But just wanted to tell you that there are many different tools and techniques for actually encouraging your brain to think differently. One of the tools we often use is called mashup, where we make a whole list of a whole bunch of random words relating to our topic, and then we grab two of them and start pushing them together. Where I've seen examples of this is where you take two different industries and combine them. For example, somebody had developed the idea of a drive-through flu clinic. So they'd taken the idea of fast food delivery and combined it with the need to move people through flu shots quickly but safely, and actually merged the two and developed this drive-through flu clinic where people could drive through, get their flu shot, have a little waiting area to make sure there's no adverse reaction, and head on their way for the day. So it's a way that they were able to get a lot more people through their flu shots by doing a mashup, so by ideating, by combining ideas from different areas. Often we can look outside of our own industry for ideas that will bring fresh and rich new ideas and solutions into our system. So one of the tools that we talk about using is something called Scamper. So Scamper is sort of a structured tool that can help you stretch your thinking. And I wish we had more time. When we do this session in person, or if we even have a longer chunk of time, we actually introduce a ton of these different ideation tools that you can use and leverage. And I was really amazed that we come into a room with blank slates of paper and we come out with these huge solutions by just playing around with ideation. And ideation isn't necessarily about sort of just brainstorming the way you traditionally think of things, but there's many different structured tools that you can use to really help you to really grow your thinking. So if anyone's not has anyone used Scamper before on the call? Maybe I should ask that first and can leverage some of the knowledge on the call. Put up your hand if you've used it before. So it looks like there's a couple whose hands are up. So if you have used Scamper before, don't hesitate to jump in and add to this. But Scamper is one tool you can use when you're actually looking at redesigning a system. So what the Scamper Challenge does is it has, for the word Scamper, it's got a word that represents each of those letters. So substitute for the S, C, combine, adapt, magnify, minimize, and modify, put to other uses, eliminate, reverse, or rearrange. So what it can do is taking a look at your food delivery service for this system and say, okay, substitute. So could we use real dining ware instead of paper plates for what's delivered to seniors? Could they combine? So could they have delivery staff also include a dietitian to help with the seniors' nutrition, so that was a dual visit? Could they adapt? Could the food come with extra meal preferences or options so that food changes quickly? If they wanted something different, they'd be able to be more agile. Could the delivery cars actually be food trucks in some way of making it, again, something that's a little more current, something that's able to customize what people need? Could delivery staff function in some way like waiting staff, so it's more like a restaurant experience? They had actually talked about elimination. Could they replace delivery staff with drones? Probably not, but or reverse rearrange. So this is, again, challenging you to think, how can I turn this idea right on its head? And perhaps what you could do is pick seniors up at a bus and take them to a restaurant space. Take them to a central community location where they have an opportunity to be social. So this is where we're going to roll up our sleeves again, everyone, and we're going to pull up a blank Scamper. And again, we're going to get you to try this. So thinking about our seniors in Denmark, I want you to grab your pen again, do what you did on the mind map, and start thinking about what are some options. So it's going to be a little more challenging to do this because of space, but let's look at substitute, combine, adapt, magnify, put to other uses, eliminate, or reverse. I'm not going to limit where you start. If you start thinking of ideas, just start typing it into those rows where you can think of there might be something else you can do. So I am going to invite you to start any time now. I'm hoping I can get my pen to work this time. I guess we're all going in the same place now. Thank you for your patience as we tried this out today. I'm going to see if I can move some of these. So we have meals as a social outing, modify the foods so seniors can adapt them easily. Use other seniors who'd like to cook. I love that suggestion. That's a brilliant idea. Have really relaxed meal times. Portion size choices. These are amazing ideas. And I'm so sorry for the group of people who wrote some wonderful ideas in the adapt section. We can't read them right now, but if you want to put them maybe on the perimeter, I'll read them out. Order choices. Yeah, so what they did in some places, they actually ended up building a menu. So they built a beautiful looking menu. It was actually designed, not just an ugly piece of paper, a beautiful looking menu that seniors could use and pick what they wanted. Yes, eliminate those forced menus. Reverse rearrange. I love the idea of cooking classes. It's a great idea. So mix and match entrees and sides. And, you know, it's amazing. You could have been the designers working in Denmark because these are a lot of the ideas they came up with. You know, oh, look at that, adapt menu to online option in the moment. Yeah, brilliant ideas. So what we're seeing here is a real opportunity to dig deeper. so that when we actually provide a bit of a structure for ourselves, it can help us come up with new solutions. Now, this is one of many, and I'm so sorry that we don't have more time today to dig into this. There's a few more that are available online. I'm just going to pop a link into the chat box right now. We've developed a resource I'm going to talk about at the end of the day as well called Mindshift, and it includes a bunch of activities that you can use for this purpose. On our innovation page as well on the council website, there's a little bit more robust toolkits, but we'll also send some resources out after today. But I wanted to bring your attention to that Mindshift cards. They're available as a PDF online, and so you can always pull them off and pick some ideas from there. So thanks a lot, you guys. A lot of really, really brilliant ideas you've got here, from allowing family members to visit, to having seniors menu plans, to online versions, to getting restaurants to cater. It's just fantastic. So what we do, what we know about this process is that by ideating and just getting ideas out there, often we can build on these ideas and generate new ideas and solutions. So we have all the ideas in the world out there. We would actually ideate. We then take some time before we move into the true prototype stage to go back to that persona that we developed. Remember, we talked about empathy, and we talked about really understanding the needs of the people at the end of the line. We also really looked at developing a persona, so we would develop sort of clusters of aggregates of the people that we're serving and designing for. We would then take all those amazing ideas that we've gathered and kind of filter them, all those ideations, and filter them through these personas to make sure that what we're looking at prototyping is still aligned with that foundation on empathy, the foundation on the needs of the people you're designing for. So prototyping is now getting the ideas and explorations, all these ideas you've come up with, and into the physical world. It's actually trying them out in practice. So it's about spending the time to show how it works, or to even see how it works, because it may not work. And it's building it in order to really work out the kinks. And again, there's so many similarities between this and PDSA models. Like I never see, it's very similar. It's like we're testing. This is what we're doing. We're actually, you know, plan, do, study, act, and we're actually, this is the do stage. We're trying to see how we can build it. This is about rapid. This isn't about slow and perfect. This is about quick and dirty, getting something out there in the system, trying it out, seeing how it's going to work, and gathering feedback. So there's many different ways of prototyping, and people often think of prototyping as involving construction paper and scissors. And certainly on the left-hand side here in the images, you see a physical prototype. That's one kind of prototype. You could actually, we did an innovation lab where we didn't even provide people with any physical materials to prototype, yet they managed to build an entire waiting room out of stuff people had in their bags. And it was really amazing to see how people just kind of got very creative with a physical prototype. There's also some really neat digital prototypes, and often digital prototypes you can think they have to be perfect and refined. But there's this really great, I can actually send the link to the video after today's call if you like, and it's a monster, I can't remember the name of the game, but it's a monster animation video that IDEO, which is a design firm in the States, had developed a framework where they actually had a person basically standing behind a big cardboard, and that person responded to all the touches on the person that you would do on a screen. It's kind of hard to describe here, but it was a really neat digital prototype. So what it did is it allowed people to see how a digital prototype would, without investing a lot of money and resources into developing it. So I'll make sure I include that resources I get off to Chelsea to share after today's session. The other thing I think that's really important is to have an experiential prototype. So much of the work that we do in healthcare is very much service delivery. So service redesign is often a big focus. What are waiting rooms like? What is the ideal waiting room experience for a patient? And so this experiential piece is about how can we actually prototype the experience for people? So how can we play around with this? You know, whether it's how can we explore triage and registration in an emergency room to what a waiting room experience is like in a doctor's office or a primary care clinic. So there's many different things that we can do here, and actually getting people to try it out and see how it feels for them. So with the Good Kitchen example, this is some of the things they actually prototyped. So on the left-hand side, you see an absolutely beautiful menu that they created. So they created a menu that was much more aesthetically appealing, where people could pick what they wanted to eat, that there was choice. They really tried to change their packaging so the food was more appealing to people visually. They really focused on fresh ingredients. They tried to really hear the feedback from seniors about cooking seasonally. So when plums were in season, they actually cooked with them. And the other thing is that there was a lot of very talented chefs that worked for the organization. They were allowed more creative license to actually move this forward. So by taking it, they tried all these different things, and these are kind of final iterations, obviously, of what they developed, but really amazing to see how they took the feedback from the people in the system itself to develop a better solution. So how many, I'm going to get you to use your hands again here, how many of you on the call have an iMac computer or a Macintosh computer? Does anyone have a Macintosh computer? I'm not advertising for Mac right now. We got a few hands coming up. Oh, quite a few hands coming up, actually. All right, next time you look at your Mac mouse, I want you to think of this picture. This is a picture of all of the Macintosh mouse, the current version of the mouse, prototypes. So when we talk about fear of failure, the important point about prototyping is you're going to do it over and over and over again. And that, you know, this is a photograph of the rejected apple mice, and you can see it can be hard to put your ideas out there, and sometimes they'll fail, and sometimes they won't be quite right. But by developing things and testing them, it is what allows us to get to better solutions. And the challenge is if we fail without learning, but this is about learning. And in this case, this is actually, this is not a great photograph of it, but at IDEO, again, this design firm, they have a place where they store in a museum-like environment all of their artifacts from when they've been prototyping solutions. And they use them as a badge of honor, showing how it's with failure that we get to better solutions. So it's really going back to the idea of those plan, do, study, act cycles, testing, 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 prototyping, prototyping, prototyping. So once you've prototyped, you've got to a prototype of something you've landed on, very similar to that Apple mouse you might have sitting at your desk today, is you get to the actual test stage. Now, testing is a chance to get real solutions about what you've developed and to do some final refining on what you're going to do. I think the important thing about this is that this design thinking model isn't linear at all. It's going to constantly flow back and forth. You may prototype, prototype, prototype and decide that what you've got isn't right and have to go back to the ideation stage. Or you may feel like you need more information and go back to empathy. But this is a very fluid model that you're often moving back and forth between the different stages to help you get to the best solution. And in doing that, you know, you really want to check your assumptions all the time. You're always going back to what you've learned, always going back to those personas, understanding who your designer is, who the user is at the end of the system, and what they need. So it's interesting, in the final solution for the Good Kitchen, with the menus, with the changes in packaging, with the changes how the food was done, they had a 500% increase in meal orders in the first week alone. There was a 22% increase in customers. There was a 78% increase in sales of healthy dishes. Their own employee absenteeism and sick went down by 9%, and the number of job applicants tripled. People now wanted to work for this organization. There was huge improvements in customer satisfaction, better cooperation between kitchen staff, seniors, and the actual municipality that was providing the service, and improved food quality. Consistently, the people who received the food was improved, so people were eating their meals, malnutrition was diminishing, and there was increased pride among the people in the system. So the benefits were not just for the people who received the final product, they were for everyone who touched it. So sort of the power of that. So as I mentioned before, we have developed a resource called MindShift, and this is really there as a tool that can be used to help you generate new ideas. One thing I wanted to do today is that we're actually in the process, and I had hoped it would be done by today, but it's not. But in the next couple of weeks, we're actually going to have an online version of MindShift that's going to go live. And what that will do is allow you to kind of go in and say, I'm trying to do something around teamwork and communication, or I'm trying to do something around innovation and creativity. And it'll give you a few activities that you can do with your team to kind of help spark new ideas. So I just wanted to highlight this as a resource that we're delighted to share more broadly than BC. It'll be online, and so we're happy to have you use it. Just before we wrap up, I think this is one of my favorite quotes. I haven't failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that do not work. Don't be afraid to fail, because without that failure, we're not going to advance the system, and it's so powerful. We can always ground it in who we're designing for and understanding based on people's needs. It will allow us to get the best solutions possible. So that's it for today, and I just wanted to say thank you very much to my colleague Andrew Sue. He's my partner in crime, usually when we do these sessions. Right now he's actually in the States. He's doing a master's in design thinking for strategy, and so he's away teaching right now, but he's also a graduate in the Carr School of Design, and we work really closely, and we've been taking a lot of courses together over the last couple of years. So I just wanted to really acknowledge Andrew before I finish today, and thank everyone for the opportunity to come and present. I look forward to questions now.
So just a reminder to pose your questions to Colleen. You can do so either from the chat. You can unmute your line and pose your question. Right.
Hi, Colleen. My name is Carrie Lynn Voigt. I'm here in North Battleford, and I just want to thank you for your presentation. It was really enjoyable, and you kept us moving through the content so well, so thank you. My question is around the defining stage. In our improvement work, we have quite a bit of focus on defining the problem and then understanding what target we're working towards, so that our teams are clear on what kind of success will look like as we move towards that target. And when I heard you talking about the defining stage in design thinking, it really goes back to understanding what you've learned in the empathizing and more focusing on defining who those personas are. So my question, I think, is just around, do you feel like you need to have a pretty well-defined problem even before you kind of embark on design thinking, or where does that sort of evaluation of the current process and that sort of thing happen in this process?
Yeah, I think having a sense at least of the main problem you're looking at tackling, for sure. I think one of the challenges I've always had is I often come, I don't know if this is the case for you, but I often come up with my own solutions before I really understand it. Like I think it's part of working in healthcare, you know, especially if you've got a clinical background, you just want to get to actions and solutions. So definitely we do define the problem up front, but we really linger in the empathy stage. And I can't emphasize that enough. Emphasize that enough, is that really lingering there to spend the time understanding what the people on the receiving end are really going to need, and that can help your define be that much richer. So we definitely do have a problem, though, but sometimes that problem will change as we find out more. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Kind of, it depends. Yeah, my pleasure. Any other questions from folks on the line today? You're welcome to pop them in the chat box if that's easier for you.
Colleen, I do have a question from the chat here. Actually, a couple of them coming in from the chat. The first is from Patricia, and she says, in a typical project, what % of time would you say should be dedicated to each stage?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think it's a tough one to answer. Again, I hate to say this, but it would depend. But I would actually say at least 25% of your time is starting in empathy. That's a really, really critical stage. And define would be probably a big chunk of time. And then lastly would be prototyping, or ideating and prototyping. So I would say it's more than probably close to 50% in those first two stages, and then the rest would be in the latter three steps. And I think it would really depend on the project and who you're designing for and what you're doing. Sometimes, you know, I had an example where it was a group of surgeons coming together trying to plan a new instrument. And when they were designing the new instrument, one of the designers actually ran back, grabbed a film canister, grabbed a marker, grabbed some tape, taped together a mock-up, and boom, they were done the prototyping right there, because it was exactly what the surgeon had in mind, and they took it to the field, and it actually ended up being the final product. So I would say there's not necessarily a standard answer for that question. It would really depend. The only thing I would say is that you're going to spend 40 to 50% of your time in that initial stage. It's so critically important that you get that right. I know my colleague Andy was doing a bunch of prototyping for a student with special needs. He was nonverbal, and he was developing an interactive communication tool for him. And in that stage, the bulk of it was in that empathy and define stage to really understand who the child was and what he needed. And then the other bulk of the time was in that prototyping stage. So that was an example where prototyping was probably, you know, 25 to 30% of the model. So I would say it varies very much depending on the project and depending on what you're doing, and sometimes just depending on if the idea lands and you can find something. So I'm sorry that's not a really clear answer, but I would say but definitely the bulk, you really want to focus on those first two steps. Chelsea, you mentioned there was another question in the chat box. I'm not seeing the chat box.
From Michael. He says, what do you recommend when you want to use design thinking but you're constrained with time?
You know what? I think I always have been the belief of the adage of go slow to go fast. I think it's worth taking the time. So if you have a constraint on time, spend time in the empathy stage. Get to understand the problem. Dig deeply there, because that will help everything else along the way. If we're actually designing and truly with the end user in mind, truly, person-centered design, then it's going to pay off in the time you put into that. So the empathy stage is where I'd focus.
Another question here from Maura. What happens when we just don't get the target group, a different culture, different needs, or so out of our scope? How do we shift ourselves in that circumstance?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. So I'm going to share a very personal story. So I have a daughter who's autistic. And when I was doing one of my courses in design thinking, we had to create an empathy experience. And it is really hard for me. It was very hard for me to always understand what her life was like. And so I actually worked with her behavioral consultant to think and map out an empathy experience for me, where I put the TV on, I put the radio on, I had all the bright lights on, I had people trying to ask me questions simultaneously, and I put myself into her shoes. So my daughter often struggles at the end of a long week when she's had lots of stimulation, a lot of things thrown at her, and it can just feel overwhelming. By immersing myself in that experience with all that going on, although I could never truly understand what it's like to be on the autism spectrum, it allowed me to go, I felt so overwhelmed, and it was so difficult to filter when all these different things were going at me simultaneously. So I would say that's one of the most valuable tools. If it's so far from your own experience, explore how you can develop some sort of an empathy experience. We talked about, immersing yourself or getting their perspective. Really see how you can do that. The other thing you can do is look at empathy extremes, to really look at situations, that see people in the extremes. And, I always use the example of a waiting room experience. I remember the first time I was pregnant with my first child, and I went to my family doctor's office, and I was so excited. And I was waiting there to get the test, and our MOA in the office could be a bit scary. She was a bit curmudgeonly almost. And as she did the test, the dip for my urine or whatever it was, it wasn't a dip, but for the pregnancy test, she got this little smile on her face. And it always made me feel so happy. And when we think about the empathy experience, we can see what's important to me, that, that personal connection, the people thing. So often by looking at extremes, so a very happy experience, I could share a very difficult experience in a waiting room, but we don't think we have time for that right now. By looking at those extremes, it can also help us understand better. So I would say immersive experiences, change your perspective, and look at extremes. Hope that helps. Are there any more questions all out there, Chelsea, or are we all good?
Hi, this is Eduardo. I have a question.
You bet.
Okay, so I'm from the Ministry of Justice, and I see that to generate practical ideas for improvement, there's also another practical framework that it has been used in the past that is called the ECRS, which is the Eliminate, Combine, Rearrange, and Simplify. So I see that it has like a very common, or it's kind of like the same as the Scamper, which Scamper has more of those ones. So do you know what would be more useful, or what is this like a substitution of that ECRS, or?
Yeah, and honestly, I've never used the ECRS, so I couldn't answer that honestly. I think that as many tools that you could have at your disposal, the better. We often will pull in, mashups, we'll pull in Scamper, we'll pull in, we do, there's a bunch of other tools, 50 gets you 10, where we really rapid fire brainstorming, like very rapid fire. You have to get 50 ideas in 5 minutes. There's many different tools for ideation in that stage in the process. So I would say whatever works for you, and mix it up, because I sometimes think that when you mix it up and you can leverage different solutions for helping with your ideation, it can really grow and have richer solutions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to look that one up, though.
This is Chelsea from the Health Quality Council. I mentioned it in the chat, but I just also want to let folks know that the poll is now open. So if you could just take a moment to let us know about what you thought of the presentation today. I'm also just going to take the opportunity to thank Colleen. Thank you. That presentation resonated, I know, with so many of us around the table here at HQC. Really resonates with Saskatchewan's pursuit to patient and family-centered care. I see a lot of linkages that we could do with to embed some of these models within our own improvement work. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us and share your wisdom with us.
It's truly my pleasure. Thanks a lot for the opportunity, and thanks to everyone on the phone for being somewhat of guinea pigs and trying to compress this into a very short session. So I really look forward to the feedback and hearing what we could do. You know, not used to presenting it in this format or in this time duration, so really thanks for your patience as we tried this out today. You were a great audience and very interactive. You get prizes for that.
Well, just a note to everyone that we did record today's session, so we will be placing both the recording and the presentation, as well as some of the links to materials that Colleen mentioned during the call today to our website. You can find it on the HQC website under the QI Power Hour page, and you can expect those to be posted early next week. So thanks so much for everyone for joining us today. Again, if you could take a moment to fill out the poll before you sign off the WebEx, we'd appreciate your feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.